The planet Kumaria explodes. Bears rise up, bears eat humans. The Wall of Severance is erected. This is all we're given for context before being thrown into the surreal world of Yurikuma Arashi. As the energetic and excited voice of a girl tells us of visceral things, we see them illustrated in bright colors with cutesy, curved edges. It's not jarring when put this way, but that raises the question, should this be scary? Can we believe what we're seeing? Yurikuma Arashi was director Kunihiko Ikuhara's third original anime project, airing in 2015 and running for 12 episodes. The show follows Genko's romantic pursuit of Kureha, who is coming to terms with the death of her former partner. But this is an Ikuhara anime, so it's not that straightforward and there's a whole lot more going on. Yurikuma tackles greater themes, including but not limited to the fetishization of lesbians in media, internalized homophobia, regular homophobia, bullying, S-class relationships, purity, the male gaze, the idea of predatory lesbians, and the Yuri genre as a whole. If you think that's a lot to cover in 12 episodes, you'd be right. Yurikuma is widely regarded as Ikuni's weakest work. There are quite a few things that get fumbled, and this is most commonly attributed to the short run. A single core is a lot less time to develop and explore heavy and abstract ideas, especially when compared to Penguin Drum's 24 episodes and Utena's 39. For all its faults, Yurikuma still has value and does manage to construct a meaningful core message. But whether it succeeds in delivering that message is dependent on the viewer. So today I want to take some time to explore Yurikuma Arashi, the ideas it dwells in, and its ultimate purpose. Our goal here is to come to a holistic understanding of what Yurikuma Arashi is trying to say, and to determine whether that message makes it through or not. If we want to talk about Yurikuma, we need to be able to speak its language. Various motifs and symbols are used throughout the show, some unique to the work, and some shared with other Ikuhara properties. We've got a bit of decoding to do if we want the work as a whole to make sense to us, and the best place to start is the title, Yurikuma Arashi, or Lily Bear Storm. These three words make up the core pillars of the show. Let's go piece by piece here, and along the way we'll get a pretty good idea of what the work is all about. Yuri is referring to the lilies that are predominantly featured as symbols of love between girls, but it is also alluding to the Yuri genre as a whole. For those not in the know, the Yuri genre featured lesbian relationships, though, much like yaoi, it is marketed towards the opposite sex and is often fetishistic. I would hesitate to count most works within the Yuri genre as queer content because of this. Moving on, while the English word bear can be used as slang for a large hairy gay man, the Japanese word kuma instead refers to homosexual women, though it is far less friendly. The term was not founded by the queer community and instead finds its roots in the idea of the predatory lesbian. This is a problematic stereotype which casts homosexual women as sexually aggressive and constantly hunting other, and often younger, women. The predatory lesbian concept is tied up in a whole lot of homophobia, misogyny, and stigma. Lesbians are women, and traditional values do not allow women to be initiators or the holders of power in sex. This then leads to the fear of sexually liberated or empowered women, and it all dominoes into the aggressive lesbian. By having active sex lives, they cannot coexist with these antiquated ideas of gender and sex, so they are rejected by it and cast as an enemy that threatens normal women. This, of course, is the whole idea behind the bears in Yurikuma. They are hidden predators, stalking the normal, good, innocent girls. The act of eating, which is a heavy sexual metaphor, may as well end the lives of their prey. The bears are never satisfied, uncontrollable, and slave to their desires. This very pointedly isn't the portrayal we get in Yurikuma, but it is the narrative used in fear-mongering by the Invisible Storm. This storm makes up the final piece of the title. It is a very clear name for homophobia. The invisible part speaks to a more Japan-specific aspect of this. While violent homophobia there is rare, though not non-existent, discrimination tends to take on a quieter form, one that seeks to reject those deemed other. This leads to social isolation, and it's part of why bullying is such a widespread problem in Japan. There is a very real part of the culture that sees this rejection and harassment as a means of maintaining conformity. Japan is not a heterogeneous country. No place like that truly exists, thus there is no way to maintain this status quo. That's a fallacy from the start. But patriarchy and other hierarchies of power still exist, thus oppression is a reality, and the Invisible Storm is a direct representation of it. With the title sorted out, we have a decent understanding of Yurikuma's foundation. However, there are quite a few terms that get thrown around repeatedly in the show and deserve an explanation. These are all tangible things in universe that act as vessels for other complex ideas. The first is the Wall of Severance, a literal divide between the world of bears and the world of humans. It should be noted that the Wall of Severance was erected by humans to keep bears out. This is a physical manifestation of the rejection of queer communities and culture by a society where heterosexuality is in power. The lack of queer representation in media is an example of this. Queer relationships and people can't be featured without gripes of forced representation, or the content being labeled explicit despite heterosexual content of the same nature being considered appropriate for all ages. A romance movie centering around two women won't be featured in the romance section of a streaming site. It will be sorted into the gay-lesbian section. This is the wall of severance. Queer people aren't allowed to exist within the rest of society. Instead, they are sanctioned off to the side. Of course, when bears cross the wall of severance, it is assumed their goal is to eat girls. Eating should be a pretty clear euphemism. If it's not, let me just spell it out. Sex. Eating in Yurikuma means sex. It also does literally mean eating, but only sometimes. There's a bit more to it though. Bears eating girls is generally synonymous with desire that lacks love, i.e. lust. It's not so much a matter of people connecting as it is fulfilling an urge, satiating an appetite. Admittedly, this metaphor ends up a little confusing and does get dangerously close to implying that being sexually active is bad. Going alongside lust, we have our symbol of true love, the promise kiss. Defying all expectations, the promise kiss isn't necessarily romantic, but instead, it is love in its purest form. One promise kiss is a literal kiss shared between Ginkgo and Kureha. The other is a jar of honey given to Lulu by her little brother Mirun. Both cases illustrate the idea that love is transcendent and can cause miracles to occur. Kureha is transformed into a bear by Lady Kumaria, and Mirun defies death time after time. The latter instance is what cements the promise kiss as a love that is beyond the romantic sense of the word. Mirun's affection for Lulu is childlike and familial. It is a love for the sake of love. Now that we have an understanding of the thematic puzzle pieces used in Yurikuma, we can meet the work on its own terms and engage with it more thoroughly. When it comes down to it, what we're looking at here is a work of radical queer ecology. So what do I mean when I say queer ecology? What is that? It's not exactly a term that you hear thrown around every day. So, put simply, it is the union of ecological science and queer theory, resulting in the deconstruction of nature as heterosexual and a subsequent reconstruction as something far more sexually diverse, which is, for the record, a far more factual representation of the natural world. For a long time, the natural world has been defined as something exclusively straight. It's incredibly common for gay relationships to be labeled unnatural, or for the sexual habits of animals to be used as proof that heterosexual, male-dominated relationships are the norm, or as God intended. But when you actually look at nature, this isn't true at all. Homosexuality is incredibly pervasive among animals from all corners of the globe. Trey the Explainer recently did a fantastic video covering this topic, so if you don't believe me or you just want to see some scientific evidence, check that out. Beyond gay relationships, there are animals that are polyamorous, non-binary, transgender, you name it. There's far more sexual diversity in the world than some people would have you believe. And so that's what queer ecology is about at its core, breaking down the idea that nature is purely heterosexual, though it goes farther than that. Society and human beliefs are the ones responsible for this narrative, so breaking down the human perpetuation of these ideas is vital as well. Cities are often seen to have higher queer populations. They are generally thought of as safer and more accepting than rural towns, which have an image of being more close-minded and traditional. As a result, the natural world has been taken from the queer community, and reclaiming part of it for ourselves is important. Creating rural and nature-oriented queer communities is part of that, and so is the media that draws strong connections between homosexuality and the natural world. Brokeback Mountain isn't well known because it's about two cowboys going at it. It's well known because they're going at it in a mountain. The homosexual aspect of their relationship is expressly associated with nature. It should be clear how all this relates back to Yurikuma Arashi. Open homosexuality is directly paired with nature. Lesbians are bears. But the show goes even further. The kingdom of bears is made up of small rural villages, vast fields, giant forests. The world that bears live in is smack dab in the middle of nature, and they're right at home. This creates a stark contrast with the world across the Wall of Severance. The human side of the wall is an industrial cityscape. Everything is orderly and developed. In other words, it's a complete reversal of the ideas we see regarding real-life communities. In Yurikuma, the natural world is gay, and the unnatural world is straight. Is it just that flip that makes me call the show radical queer ecology? No, because it runs even deeper. Yurikuma sets out to destroy the status quo when it comes to classifications of gay and straight. Religion is only ever seen practiced by bears, a far cry from the homophobia that plagues many real-world religious communities. In fact, heterosexuality is, in a way, dead in the world of Yurikuma Arashi. The only heterosexual relationship we see is Lulu's parents, who aren't even named and function more as set dressing. Kureha's mother, Rhea, must have been with a man at some point, but he is never seen or mentioned. The only relationships and yearnings we see are between women. This world of women-loving women is no utopia, though. Men may not be physically involved here, but patriarchy is still an extremely tangible force. The invisible storm is a product of this. In order for lesbianism to be demonized, there must be some authority that benefits from its oppression. The girls who participate in the invisible storm have internalized homophobic and misogynistic ideas. They're also lesbians, that much is abundantly clear, but they choose to conform to societal pressures and remain invisible rather than become victims of the storm themselves. In the process, they perpetuate the system and do harm to others. Patriarchy still has a physical manifestation in the life judges. It's no coincidence that the only named male characters are beings with power to rule over others and grant permissions. They're the greatest authority figures, bar Kumaria herself. It's important to note that while the invisible storm is only a feature of the human side, the bears aren't free of patriarchy either. They're still bound by the wall of severance in the life judges. Still separate and other. What we see in the final episode, then, is an escape from a world ruled by men and mired in homophobia. In classic Ikuni fashion, the girls disappear from the world and are transported to another, a paradise that is symbolic of an existence where they are free of stigma and oppression. The world the girls escape to is one ruled only by love. It is again filled with nature, an open sky that connects the forest and the moon. The radical world that Yurikuma envisions is one where queer love is a force of nature, homophobia is an unnatural poison, and heterosexuality is almost a foreign concept. Yurikuma goes farther than almost anything else in regards to queer ecology. It illustrates these ideas in a unique, beautiful, and transversive way, sometimes subtle, but completely undeniable in presence. It should be a masterpiece, but sadly, it isn't. For all it does, Yurikuma is still a very flawed work. Where Yurikuma trips up is important. It's a vital part of the show's overall theme and narrative, and is a touchy subject in general. Sex. The meta-narrative in Yurikuma is one that critiques society and the anime industry, and by tripping at this fundamental step, the show ends up damaging itself immensely. But before we get into that, we need to understand how this all fits into the story and what it means. I hesitate to sort Yurikuma into the genre of Yuri, because the show purposefully defies and critiques the genre. While there are some genuinely good queer representations in Yuri anime, the vast majority of these shows cater to a male audience and fetishize love between women. If it isn't obvious, this is a problem. Relationships between women don't exist for the titillation of men, but a lot of media still objectifies queer relationships and markets them as entertainment rather than real private feelings shared between people. Simultaneously, the same media will feed into concepts like predatory lesbianism and queerness being a phase or something evil. The show summarizes this in one phrase: you hated us from the beginning, but you loved us from the beginning. This means you fetishized us and used us for your own pleasure. You reveled in our relationships, but at the same time you denied us personhood and rights, and you called our love invalid and fake. This is a core facet of Yurikuma, the double relationship that Yuri media feeds. It allows for simultaneous consumption and denial of humanity. Even initially queer content for a queer audience can be co-opted and turned into fetishistic form. The Class S genre is an example of this. Class S refers to non-sexual, highly emotionally intimate relationships between girls. In their early years, these novels were written by women for women. However, as time went on, the genre grew and perceptions of it changed. When early stories began to involve sexual relationships between women, the genre was banned by the Japanese government. Though Class S would eventually return, the form it takes nowadays tends to be idealized female characters engaging in, let's say, titillating friendships for the consumption of men. These girls are never allowed to be explicitly gay or to love each other in anything more than subtext. The complete retooling of an originally transversive genre has had a tangible effect on cultural thoughts. The real-world perception of homosexuality among women in Japan is that it's something to be outgrown by graduation. Something like training wheels relationships to inform them of how to act for a man later on. Those that fail to outgrow homosexuality then become predators. Bears. It should be clear that Yurikuma aims to critique these ideas. None of these women are going to outgrow their orientations, and they are clearly not chaste. The portrayal we see is supposed to spit in the face of media that denies women their pleasure while feeding into the desires of men. Sexual desire is plainly exhibited by the girls, and it's central to the plot. Not just raw lust, though. Deep, true love between women is just as important. Shots featuring nudity and raw sexuality are commonplace, and while their purpose is to make clear that women hold these desires, and that there's nothing wrong or bad about that, some major missteps obscure that message. Many scenes are highly sexualized and play into the male gaze. The acts of love between two women are dolled up and angled at the camera for the audience. Yes, these shows of love and lust shouldn't be labeled any more indecent than their heterosexual counterparts, but there is a fetishistic feeling to some of it. It begs the question, can Yurikuma really critique the male gaze while playing into it? Can any media focusing on the sexuality of women loving women manage to escape the eyes of viewers who are only there to objectify? There are many ways that this issue can be interpreted, but it's hard to ignore when you take another major failing of Yurikuma into account. With so much squished into a 12-episode format that Ikuni clearly wasn't comfortable with, errors were bound to arise. But the worst by far is the accidental implication that lust is evil. I deeply believe that this is not what the narrative was meant to be saying, but it's easy to leave a watch of Yurikuma believing that this was part of the core messaging, especially when it's such a prevalent idea in both American and Japanese culture. With sex is bad polluting the audience's read of the show, suddenly many other messages Yurikuma was trying to impart begin to shatter. Bears become evil again, Class S relationships are implied to be the only acceptable form of love. Yurikuma has great parts to it, but the muddling of such important themes is what ultimately holds it back from being a work on the level of Utena or Penguin Drum. No work is without its flaws, not even the works of the Dark Father himself. As important as it is to recognize Yurikuma's failings, it's equally important to praise it for what it does right. Even though it's often regarded as the weakest Ikuni work, it still goes a hell of a lot farther than the vast majority of anime out there. At its core, Yurikuma Arashi is a critique of the anime industry's treatment of queer women. It goes beyond that though, spinning philosophy and cultural critique into its narrative as well. It's busy. All Ikuni works are. There's a lot to parse through and some of the presentation ends up sloppy as a result. Still, it's got a whole lot of merit, and it's something anyone who consumes queer media should pay credence to. So does Yurikuma Arashi work? Well, I'd say it does, to an extent. A dedicated fan of Ikuni, a queer viewer, or anyone inclined towards analysis will likely understand the show's very heavy subtext. However, the missteps result in an experience that is likely a bit confusing to many, with messages that could fly right over the heads of the viewers. At the end of the day, though, Kureha and Ginko get to be together. They get to kiss and escape a world of hate. That's still important. Flawed as Yurikuma Arashi may be, it's still full of love, and aiming to show two women happy together, free from ignorance and pain. And for a lot of people, that really means a lot. Thank you so much for watching this video. It was pretty darn dense, but I think it was worth it, and I hope you do too. If you liked this video, why not leave a like or a comment? And if you want to hear me talk more at length on Ikuni anime, check out our channel, the Digital Dream Club. Ikuni is one of our favorite directors around here. We're also on Twitter, at DigiDreamClub, and we always love it when people say hi. Thanks again for watching, and because I'm legally obligated to say it, gao gao.